Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. As always, the Grueling Truth is powered by Betty.net. Betty.net is the best bet for finding an online sportsbook or casino that's right for you. Check them out at betting.net and make sure you check out PointsBet, which is our top recommended casino for betting on the fights this weekend. And we got a big show today. We're going to recap Triple G and Canelo. We are going to preview Parker against Joyce, and then we'll have our Old Farts Corner, where we'll look at the night Michael Spinks beat Larry Holmes. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, John Raspanti. How you doing, John?
Doing good, Mike. Always a pleasure. How are you?
I'm all right. I was a little disappointed in the fight, but
a little.
I was a lot disappointed in the fight, John. But we're getting to the point where it would surprise me more if I wasn't disappointed in the fight, the way everything goes nowadays. I think it was obvious that Triple G was old. I think it's obvious, and we talked about it last week, and I don't hear that many people saying it, but to me, Canelo doesn't look like Canelo anymore either.
I don't know about that.
I think he still looks good, but yeah. I don't know. It could just be because he's fighting bigger guys. He's at a bigger weight, but this almost
tango. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Somebody else said that too. It takes two to tango. He looked like himself, but I don't know. The effort from both of them seemed lacking to me, and I don't like to. I don't know this for sure. It's just opinion. Obviously, that's all we're doing here, and I don't like to say that because fighters take so much guts to get in there, fight, throw punches at each other. But I don't know. It just didn't seem the intensity. And it threw me too, Mike. I didn't mention this to you. When Golovkin was preparing for the fight, he was in his dressing room. He looked very serious. He didn't want the cameras in there for a while. You didn't see all this. And then when he walked out, he didn't do it with much fanfare. He looked very serious. I thought, okay, well, he's come to win. He didn't look nervous like he did in the first two. And then Canelo had his whole band and everything played, serenading him as he came out. He's a rock star, But then when the fight started, I don't know. It's either he can't pull the trigger. I was looking for that great line from Joe Louis, and for the article for the Grueling Truth that I wrote, that said Joe Louis said something like, "I could see the openings, I just can't let the punch go." Yeah. And it was either that or he's just so old now. It takes him so long to get going that by the time he gets going, he's already lost 5 or 6 rounds. And in this case, he lost like 7 or 8, and he started to do better in the 9th and 10th, but that was mostly because Canelo got tired too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this was not as big as a disappointment from Leonard Duran 3, but I think it was kind of the same thing because I thought that the way Duran had lost to Leonard in the second fight, that he would probably rather die than lose to him again. And I thought with everything, and maybe they took the camera off in the dressing room because Canelo was eating a steak. You never know.
Well, I had a few people say that it looked like a gentleman's agreement between the two of them.
It did.
Yeah, well, I know. And I said that to my wife when I was watching. I went, I don't know. And I hate this. And trust me, I hate to say this because I love boxing so much, but it was like a nod and a wink. Like, yeah, don't try to kill me. We'll make it look pretty good. And the problem is with this is that boxing has had this happen in its history. So it's hard.
It's happened a lot recently too.
Yeah, it's hard to
ignore. Mayweather looked that way to me.
Yeah, he did. I didn't get that, but you got that. So it's hard. Like I said, it's hard to ignore it. So you can't, it pops into your brain and you see these guys only going, 60%, 70%? I don't know. It's hard to say, but it was not exciting. It was, even the crowd booed a few times. And the first 2 fights were such good fights.
Yeah, especially, both fights were great fights. I really like the second one. It was a closer fight. It was more competitive. And I think the sad thing about all this is it goes down as Canelo beats Triple G, basically 2 out of 3 with 1 being a draw. Where Canelo's career, you don't really have a signature win, or not Canelo, but Triple G. You got maybe Danny Jacobs is his signature win. So that hurts him career-wise when you look at the resume and you want to compare it to other people. And the sad thing is, if he gets that first decision against Canelo, the perception of Triple G completely would be changed. And to me, that's the saddest thing out of all of this.
That's very true. And I talked about that in the article. Triple G didn't even get to the United States till he was 30. What would have happened if he was 24 and we saw him and he would have fought some guys and people either really overrate him or underrate him. There seems to be no middle with him when he was.
It's hard to rate him just because of the lack of
his resume. Yeah, his resume. But he's knocked out 20 straight guys, which no matter what is still pretty impressive. But
yeah, and a lot of those guys were solid contenders. They just weren't great fighters. I mean, you get the Macklins of the world. He was a tough guy. I mean, hell,
David Lemieux,
David Lemieux. Yeah, who knocked out David Lemieux, other than Triple G?
Yeah, so I know it's too bad that I think he's Hall of Fame because he was so dominant for a while, but he wants to continue, and that. I mean, like we're speculating here, then unless he really didn't try very hard in this fight, which would blow my mind. I don't know how you're competitive and you don't try. Yeah, I just don't understand that at all.
I do. When you're told if you want that third payday, you'll play nice.
$25 million, I guess. Yeah, I guess everybody's got a price.
I would have that price, John. I would go in and do absolutely nothing for $25 million.
I doubt that very seriously.
No, I would.
Competitive as you are.
But it's $25 million. You know how many competitive things I can do with $25 million, John?
Well, yeah. And then there's the argument that somebody would say, oh, come on, Mike, who cares? You're like, I'm going to win. Well, who cares about what people think? You got 25 million smackers in your back pocket.
I don't think I would care, John. It's $25 million, John. I'll just go buy an island with nobody on there but me. Why would I care what anybody thinks then?
I don't know. I think at some point you'd get annoyed, especially if he went against the bargain, like in Body and Soul, or he kind of double crosses him. It's like, oh, okay, you really want to fight? Okay.
Well, that's what should happen here. Because, I mean, that does call into question if Triple G were to fight again and all of a sudden he looks decent and he beats somebody that's a decent fighter, because then it's kind of obvious. And you know, Pacquiao had a couple decent performances after the Mayweather fight.
He did.
And he had his excuse. And
I mean, supposedly the WBA orders anything is a joke, but they're ordering Lara against Triple G. And that's not a good fight for Triple G. Obviously,
it might be, and Lara shot too.
He can't move as much, which is good, but I don't know. A lot of fights. Charlo, people want him to fight Charlo. Is that a good fight for him at this point in his career?
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I don't think his trainer did him any good, and I really like Jonathan Banks, but this whole idea of coming out and trying to outbox Triple G was ridiculous. Yeah. Oh, that's what I heard.
Yeah,
you know,
it's my wife calling.
Wives do that sometimes. They do call and interrupt shows.
Oh, you've got a wife now too, don't you?
I know, and she's going to say something here any second.
All right, so I'm going to let you talk about this fight for a second, but I go take care of something real quick, okay?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say that I just didn't think that trainer Jonathan Banks, who I really like as a human being, he's a great guy, and I think he's a good trainer. I don't think he helped Triple G at all by his strategy and saying you get a box. And he did try to get him going later in the fight, but their whole mindset coming in was that they had to outbox Canelo, and they could outbox Canelo at times, but to win against him, you had to really go to war with him. And hey, I know how I don't know. That would have to be hellish to do that. And he knows it. He did it twice. Perhaps at 40, he said, I'm just not going there anymore. And he said, I'm going to keep him on the end of my jab and try to outbox him, but he's not fast enough. So to do that and win against Canelo, who doesn't lose decisions, as we know, was a tough thing. And then they changed up as Canelo slowed down, and he went back to his old style in a way in rounds 8 and 9, and he started doing better. So it would have been interesting if he had done that from the beginning. If he had jumped on Canelo and tried really hard to push him back and be real aggressive, throw hard punches, that might have changed it, but he didn't. So the strategy going in,
the strategy was terrible. Yeah, I mean, to me, why, especially when you're an older guy, the last thing to go on an older guy is his power. The first thing to go is his speed.
Yes. And he wasn't very fast to begin with. So he's got a great jab. We know that, but he's not fast enough anymore. His reflexes are dulled. So I don't know what they were thinking, and they weren't thinking, and that's too bad. Abel Sanchez was the guy that would have been able to push Golovkin into punching more and being more aggressive. But, you can only say so much. The guy didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing there is this. The bad thing for him is Canelo, instead of fighting Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and Miguel Cotto, should have just fought Triple G a year or two before the first fight. I think that would have gave us a clear definition of who was better. Actually, I think the fight in 2017 gives us a clear definition at their best who was better, because both of these guys in their prime, I think Triple G smokes him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know about smokes him, but I think he beats him, and he beat him in 2017. I don't care what anybody says. He
He
beat him.
beat him
Anybody
easily
will.
too. I mean,
Yeah,
it
he
was
did.
9-3, at
Yeah, he
best
beat
8-4.
Yeah,
So,
he beat him, and he got robbed, and he's upset about that, and I don't blame him. I would be too. And he actually said afterwards that he thought he won all 3 fights, and it's like, well, okay, but fighters think that pretty much all the time that they didn't lose. So,
well, especially immediately after.
I guess
Yeah,
didn't get hit
but
very much though, so I don't know how But yeah, it was just disappointing, Mike. You're right. I mean, I've heard what 500,000 to 600,000 buys, and then I heard 1,000,000 buys. So somebody's lying here. I would think it would probably be
what I
low.
saw was like 500,000 worldwide,
Yes,
or 1,000,000 worldwide,
yes,
500,000 in the US. And I think the first fight was what, between 1.2 and 1.5,
yeah,
and the second fight was like 1,000,000, and those were just in the US.
yeah. I don't think people bought it. I mean, the hype was good the last week, but they didn't sell the fight very good. And this is the one DAZN wanted. They wanted this fight when they signed Golovkin. They wanted Golovkin and Canelo 3, and it took a long time to get here, and that's the problem. It took too long.
It took way too long,
Yeah,
and there was nothing that was done. And I mean, especially, I mean, it kind of kills it because Canelo's coming off getting his ass straight up beat, and Golovkin did not look the same. So we knew we weren't going to get what we got in the first 2 fights. We were going to get what we got, which is why I didn't buy it. I mean, Triple G is probably my favorite fighter going today, and I would pay any time to pay for him, because in his prime, or even in the last few years, heck, I even woke up at like 6 a.m. to watch him fight in Japan against Murata, because he puts on a show. The big drama show is gone. Hopefully he won't continue to fight, because that lack of speed will lead to some bad happenings, I think, for him if he continues to fight. And plus,
yeah.
it's only going to hurt him, because if he fights a Charlo, I mean, the Golovkin of 5 years ago would have beat the hell out of Charlo. And now maybe Charlo's got a shot.
For sure, and I don't I don't think he can beat Charlo at this point, because Charlo's faster again, and you'd have the same problem he had with Canelo. And I don't know how motivated he can get. When you've been there, how do you get yourself fired up to fight Charlo when you can't get yourself fired up to fight Canelo the third time? So I don't know. He wants to fight. He wants to continue. He said, "Remember, guys, I got 2 titles still." So,
he's not going to have him for very long.
No, it's just hard to walk away. I mean, I understand that, Mike. He's not old as far as a human being, and that's hard. People go, "Oh, why won't?" He loves it. I mean, you love something, it's hard to walk away, and he's been doing it since he was a kid. And the thought, he thinks about it, goes, "That sounds okay," and then he goes, "Wait, it doesn't sound okay. What am I going to do? What am I going to do?" It defines me. So, yeah, it's tough.
All right, we have a big heavyweight clash this weekend. The Battle of the Joes. Joseph Parker against Joseph Joy, Joe Joyce. To me, this is one of the more interesting matchups of the year. I mean, these are not your average Joes. Let's use that. I mean, nobody's ever said anything like that before. But Joseph Parker, in his first fight with Derek Chisora in 2021, came flying out of the traps. He knocked out the New Zealander, or knocked him down within the first 7 seconds. He looked like maybe he had started a career change. Looked like maybe he was going to be more active, more punching, sit down on these punches a lot more. That's not been the case since there. I mean, we saw him destroy Christian Hammer in 4 rounds. And Christian Hammer is a good, durable guy, but Christian Hammer shot. There's not much left there. I think the big question there is, there's 2 questions. Number one, Joseph Parker has some very good boxing skills for a heavyweight. Can he go 12 rounds at a fast pace and keep Joyce from tagging him? I mean, to me, that is the biggest question out of all this. Because if he can, I think he's going to win the fight. But I don't know that he can do that, because we've also seen him have some issues in the 10th, 11th, 12th round with people. What's your take on this?
Well, the first fight with Chisora, yeah, Parker got knocked down. He didn't look good. Second fight, he looked much better to me. And his confidence seemed to grow. And a lot of it's confidence. I think he's going in right now with a lot of confidence. That helps. Because Joe Joyce, we know he's got about 4 layers of granite in his chin. So Parker's going to hit him with a lot of punches. Joe Joyce is just going to look at him because Parker can punch, but not that hard. So it's going to be a matter of what kind of shape he's in, I think, because he can outbox Joe Joyce. I mean, pretty much everybody can outbox Joe Joyce to a degree.
Except for Deontay Wilder, probably.
Well, yeah. That's why I said pretty much everybody, because that's what he said.
Deontay's a Hall of Famer, though, if you read the
According to Deontay, he's a Hall of Famer. Yeah. So
he'll be. I heard that he's getting elected to the Deontay Wilder Hall of Fame next year, and I think it's going to be held down in Alabama, or Arkansas, or wherever the hell he's from. But
Alabama, legend in your own mind. Yeah.
And I think this with Joe Joyce, I think he proved his durability when he took the best shots from Daniel Dubois. He beat the unbeaten Dubois, who was knocking everybody out. He fractured Dubois' eye socket, and that was in the 11th round. So that tells me, number one, Joyce is not throwing a ton of punches. He's coming forward. He's trying to impose his will on you. And I think it's going to be hard to wear him out, even though he has looked tired in fights. Even when he gets buzzed when he's tired, he doesn't look like he's going anywhere.
Yeah, he's that weird. He's very awkward, and he doesn't look very good in there. That's what a few years ago when I was going, he's not that good.
Yeah, we both thought Dubois would beat him.
Yes, exactly, and it was very close to. I mean, it wasn't like it was a blowout or anything. I think Dubois might even been ahead on one of the scorecards, but Joyce is not going anywhere. I don't know how I don't think you get him out of there. So Parker's going to have to move around and box him. And the point you made here that later in the fight, I think Parker will jump out to a lead. It just depends on how can he sustain it as Joyce comes on and starts pressuring him and hitting him more. Can he take it? He's got a good chin, I think Parker does, but he looks like he's in good shape, but I don't know. Does he have enough will? His fight with Dillian White, who he should have never lost to, almost knocked him out in the 12th round, but he got knocked down a couple times. But that was a few years ago. I don't know. I might be wrong, but I still think he's a little better now than he was as far as that goes here than then. So it's a toss-up fight as far as I'm concerned.
But my question is this. The fight that stands out to me, and the thing that really gets me is the lack of killer instinct, I think, with Parker. And I think we saw that when he knocked down, Derek Chisora 3 times. He would walk to the corner and then walk back. He showed no urgency and let him off the hook time and time again.
Yeah, he did. I thought he was going to stop him in that fight because he was looking good, and Chisora has been through so many hard fights. I mean, that guy, you talk about a war horse. He shouldn't be in there again, but he wants to fight again. He wants one more big payday. So, that could be true. Maybe he doesn't have it, and he's going to have to be at the top of his game to win. And if he gets Joyce hurt, he's going to have to go after him. He can't step back and look at him and think, He's got to go right after him because Joe Joyce isn't going to hesitate. Joe Joyce might be an artiste and a painter and all those things, but he's got killer instinct.
Well, how about this? With Joyce, though, I think that his style is so rare that it makes him almost impossible to prepare for. I mean, you can spar against pressure fighters, but it's not until you get in there with him that you really realize what it's like.
He reminds me a little teeny bit of George Foreman, the way he's so awkward in there.
Yeah, just kind of lumbers forward and swings.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're like, this guy doesn't have any talent, and he's beating everybody. So obviously he's got talent. He was a good amateur, very solid amateur, won a medal. So he's solid, but he's just one of those guys you see him fight. I mean, even in his last fight, I wasn't impressed. He got hit with about a half a dozen or a dozen right hands that he should have never got hit by. And his corner keeps telling him, don't get hit by those right hands. And later they were talking to him. He goes, I don't even feel it. So I don't know. He's playing with fire. Eventually he's going to feel it.
That was the Christian Hammer fight, correct?
The last fight he had, yeah.
I think it was Christian Hammer.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure, to be honest. He's going to feel it one of these days, but is it Parker, the guy that's going to make him feel it? And you kind of doubt that. But maybe. I mean, he might catch him with something he doesn't see, and those are the punches that always hurt fighters.
So who do you like in this fight?
Wow, this is a tough one. I want to say I'm giving the edge to Parker, but I I think what we said, or we both agree on, is Joyce could come on strong and stop him. But Parker is rolling, the juggernaut, right? I mean, he hasn't lost. I mean, I'm sorry, Joyce is rolling. He hasn't lost. Do I have to make a pick? I don't know.
I can tell. How about this? If we look at the money line betting, because I do like to talk about the gambling sometimes.
I know.
Joe Joyce is minus 205. I will tell you this also. My actual bet last week in the show was take Canelo by decision at plus 105.
Yes,
so that paid off well. Joe Joyce is minus 205, just straight up money line to win. Joseph Parker is plus 158. When I look at this,
who's favored?
Joyce is the minus 205, so he's the favorite. Parker is plus 158. So you're looking at odds are probably close to 2-1.
2-1, yeah, 2-1.
Close to that. But I'll tell you what I like here is I of course wouldn't bet it like that because I think Joyce is going to stop him. I think that Parker will start out swift. He'll be fluid. He'll be mobile. He's going to take most of the opening rounds on the scorecards while Joyce just basically works behind that jab to get close enough to land these bigger blows. I think Joyce is going to take some long-range shots in the process. But I think once we get to the middle rounds, we'll start to see this fight even up. Then in the second half, I expect Joyce's sustained pressure and unyielding pace to basically take over this fight. I think he is going to break Joseph Parker's will. And if I'm going to bet this fight, I'm going to bet Parker. I could get not bet Parker, but bet Joyce. I could get Joe Joyce right now by KO or TKO at plus 250. So I think that I would take the plus 250, betting to win by knockout. And I could also see let me see what a money line bet is, or the line bet is on the rounds. Because if you go with the round betting, just for the hell up, but I have had some luck with it lately. You could go up here and pick Joe Joyce to win like in round 11. And it's plus 3,400.
Wow.
So I would do this. I would make the bigger bet on Joyce to win by knockout. I'm getting 2.5 to 1. And then I'm betting him just for the hell of it. I'm going to throw like $20 on him to stop him in the 11th round. And I get plus, I still can't believe I see this, but plus 3,400 odds.
How much does that calculate out to?
That is a lot, John. At $10, it would calculate out to a lot. I mean, I can't believe you asked me that because I'm pretty sure I know the answer. I just don't want to get the wrong answer. So you go ahead and talk, and I will calculate it just to make sure I'm right.
Okay. Yeah, I pretty much feel the same way, even though I'm gonna say Parker wins by split decision, just because that makes a lot of sense what you said, just so that we don't agree on this. But I expect Joyce to win. I do. And that's why I said I think Parker will be ahead through 6 rounds. He'll probably be ahead 4 rounds to 2, maybe even 5 rounds to 1. But he loses interest sometimes and he peters out, and that's when Joyce comes on and Joyce tags him. That changed the whole fight around. So, yeah, I'll go with Parker by split decision by a point, but I expect Joyce to probably win. But I'm really interested in this fight because it's so close, and that's what makes it intriguing.
Put it like this. At plus 3,400 odds, if you bet $10, you win $340. At a $20 bet, you win $680.
Sounds like I'm going to have to go bet a little bit.
How about this? But you're picking the round, so it's risky. Yeah. But if you've got a lot of extra money, you could bet $100 and win $3,400.
I had a lot of extra money before, but now I don't, as you know, was my situation.
You got married.
Yes. You got it.
I think it's getting divorced, which costs the most money.
Well, there's that too. Yeah, that's true.
All right, let's go to our own farts corner. I'm going to say Joyce by 11th round stoppage. Today, we are going to talk about one of the greatest performances, one of my favorite heavyweight title fights of all time. It probably wasn't in the top 10 greatest, but it was a great fight because of so many subplots going into it. That would have been the night Michael Spinks beat Larry Holmes. I believe it was 1985 yesterday, which would have been how many years ago, John? Damn, John, that's almost 40
15,
years ago.
Yeah, 37 years ago. Is that right?
Damn.
37 years ago.
Yeah, and the thing about that is, it's the last fight I ever listened to. And it was the last heavyweight title fight, at least that I know of, because I lived in Indiana. I didn't have HBO because I lived in Indiana, and we were lucky we had antennas. Heck, we were lucky
you had TV, right? I didn't even
we're lucky we had fire and wheels. But
true. You had your horse out in front of the house.
I remember I listened to this entire card too, because I think Alfonso Ratliff upset like Carlos De Leon on the card. I forget who the other it was Dwight Pratchett fought Julio Cesar Chavez, and Chavez shut him out. And then you had Holmes Spinks too. Holmes Spinks won. I remember listening to the fight. I was cheering for Michael Spinks. He was one of my favorites as a kid. That, and of course, Rocky Marciano was one of my favorites. I didn't want to see Larry Holmes get Marciano's record. But the thing that amazed me about this fight were all the things when you sit down and think about it. Because every year I go back and I watch this fight. And I watch the complete HBO showing of the fight, because that's where you learn about Mackie Shilstone and how a guy who beat Diamond Jim McDonald June 6th, 3 months before that, gained 25 pounds and somehow seemed quicker, faster, it could punch harder. I mean, Spinks at the time was 27-0, 19 knockouts. And today, for the hell of it, I look back at people that made predictions on this fight, and the majority of these people did not even take this as a serious fight. I mean, Michael Katz, you remember Michael Katz, New York Daily News? He said it comes down to inevitability. To Larry Holmes, 225 against Michael Spinks, maybe 195. It comes down to heavyweight power against a light heavyweight slowed by extra weight. This is a mismatch. There is no way in the world Michael Spinks can win this fight. And the thing that got me is I found a quote from Billy Conn. And Billy Conn said, the guy has no chance, not because of the weight difference, but because he's just not that good of a fighter. Michael Spinks has very little talent as a boxer. You don't think Billy Conn was jealous of Michael Spinks' ability to box, do you?
That's painful that Billy Conn said that, because we know how good
I bet it was painful by September the 22nd of 1985 that Billy Conn said that also. But the other thing you had here was you had Michael Spinks fighting Larry Holmes. Larry had knocked out Leon, damn near killed him in 1980 or 81. He stopped him in the third round. So you had that. You also had the chance, since Leon had beat Muhammad Ali to be the heavyweight champion, you had the possibility that Michael Spinks and Leon Spinks could both be, the first brothers to ever be heavyweight champions, still to this day, the only brothers to ever be heavyweight champions. You had Rocky Marciano's record on the line. He was 48-0. And the Riviera, which is where the fight was, invited Rocky's children to the fight, as well as Peter as the special guest. And the idea was for Rocky's relatives to be there to graciously congratulate Holmes after Holmes won and tied the record. But the thing I remember is, and I watched a lot of pre-fight show here, is the Marciano family made it pretty evident they were cheering against Larry Holmes. And you had all of that. You had also Eddie Futch, who trained, Larry Holmes when he fought Jerry Cooney a couple years before, actually had trained Holmes a lot up until that point, was also the trainer for Michael Spinks, and he decided to sit it out because he didn't want to pick between the two. So there's a lot of things here that were going on that made this such a huge fight. And I think the odds at the time were like 7-1.
Oh yeah, I remember it. I remember it really well. I didn't expect Michael Spinks to win. I was like you. I was cheering for him, and being Italian, I didn't want Larry to get any closer to Rocky Marciano's record. Let's be honest. I wasn't writing about boxing in those days. I was just a boxing fan, but a lot of Italian pride with Rocky Marciano. So I was pulling for Michael Spinks, and I remember being surprised that Michael was totally intense and into it, and Larry was kind of going. It looked like Larry Holmes was just going through the motions. Now, I had a ton of respect for Larry Holmes, so I expected him to start coming on. But Michael Spinks fought a masterful fight. And we have to say it, the fact that, and we talked about this yesterday, the fact that people bring him up with one particular fight, the only fight he lost in his career, is ridiculous. This man was a great fighter. What he did, what you said in 3 months, to move up and fight one of the best heavyweights who ever lived. Let's be honest about Larry Holmes.
Yeah, a man who was, 48-0 with like 34 knockouts at the time?
Yes, and he might have been a little, if you want to, you might say he was a little past it. But then again, what happens in the rematch, even though the outcome was the same. Michael Spinks, what he did that night was incredible. And the thing about Michael Spinks, I don't know if you remember this, but it seemed like when he had some of his tougher fights, like when he fought the man behind me, Dwight Muhammad, aka Dwight Braxton, he would have periods where it would look like he was in some kind of trouble. He had a bad knee, and he kind of move away, and you're like,
how about this? You remember the Eddie Davis fight? I remember when I originally watched that fight, and I haven't watched it since, but I actually thought Eddie Davis might have won that fight.
I don't remember it well enough to state that, but I don't know. Might have thought it was a draw.
It was extremely close. It could have went either way, but I know a lot of people. I know who's the promoter out of Philadelphia?
Oh, Russell Peltz.
Russell Peltz. I think it was Russell, who I've seen comment about it a bunch of times that he thought Eddie Davis won, and that was in 1984. That was like a year and a half before he moved up and he beat Larry Holmes. And even the June 6th fight against Diamond Jim McDonald, which was D-Day Dynamite. I remember watching that. It was Don King Productions, and it was like on a UHF channel. But Diamond Jim McDonald actually gave him some issues.
But then he beat Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. I remember Eddie Gregory. And Eddie was really
good. I'm just talking about right before the Holmes fight. Yeah. So a lot of people really thought maybe Spinks was on the way down, and Spinks went after Holmes because if everything I read was right, because his guys offered Marvin Hagler a fight at 165 that Hagler turned down.
That's very interesting. That would have been an interesting fight between those two. It just tells you that, in a sense, again, that Michael Spinks would fight anybody. And he had the skills. He could punch. He knocked out Marvin Johnson, if you remember, another ex-champion. It was brutal, left hook before the Holmes fight. And maybe he was a little past it. He might have been, but he had enough that night to pull, which was is one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. And I still think he's extremely underrated. Michael Spinks, extremely. His career was a really dynamic career with, major ups, and then the one down, and that's what people seem to remember, the one fight.
Yeah, and actually, if you're going to remember one fight for Michael Spinks, this is the one you should remember because, like I said, nobody at that point had been the light heavyweight champion and won the heavyweight title. He moved up 25 pounds in 3 months. And the other thing here is this is the fight that I think really damaged Holmes, and it wasn't because he lost to Spinks. It was because of what happened after when he made the remark that Rocky couldn't carry my jockstrap.
Yep. I mean, I was always like this about Larry Holmes because of some of the things he said, and that, of course, did it in me for me right there. But he was just bitter and frustrated, and later on I realized that Larry, we both have spoken with Larry Holmes.
If you've had 1 10-minute conversation with Larry Holmes, then you understand.
Yes, exactly, and it makes sense. He's a human being. He probably regrets it, but it was a shocker. I remember days before the fight, I was like, oh, shoot, he's going to be 49-0 himself now.
The thing that struck me though is I could see why Holmes said that. If you watch the way Peter Marciano conducted himself before that press conference started. You would actually think that Rocky, because I watched it today, I found on YouTube like a 10 or 15 minute, or I found the press conference that had about 10 minutes before that was on. It was like a live satellite feed. I think ESPN did. And I mean, Peter Marciano's carrying on like Rocky's the one that beat Larry Holmes.
Yeah, I'm sure he was frustrated. I mean, he was in Muhammad Ali's shadow too for a number of years, and that frustrated him. And so he was very frustrated. And like on a human level, I totally get it, but it was a classless comment. I mean, let's be, in my view, but I do understand it. I mean, we do make mistakes, and I think he made a mistake, but I understand why, because he was just frustrated with the whole idea, all the talk about Rocky Marciano all the time.
Well, how about this? The other thing that I found from watching that is the quote was not exactly correct because they leave out the first 4 or 5 words when he talks about Rocky couldn't carry my jockstrap, because his actual quote was, if I remember right, I think it was, from a technical perspective, Rocky Marciano couldn't carry my jockstrap.
We'll see.
Still uncalled for, but actually true.
Yeah, and it changes things. It does. Yeah, because it is true. Larry Holmes was just a dynamic fighter with a great jab. He would have had it. He was so much bigger than Rocky Marciano. He would have had it in his face the whole time. I wouldn't count out Rocky though, because he could take it. You're talking about a guy
but so could Larry. So I think that would, if Rocky fought Larry, I think it would be an absolute war. And I think the issue would be is I don't know that you could knock either one of them out, not in their prime.
Yeah, they're both. You're talking about massive heart and will, determination. So it would be a decision fight most likely, but. Ooh, that would be. Larry was so much bigger, but Rocky was just tough as nails. So
well, yeah. Don't you think the biggest issue with this? I know Holmes was getting older, but I think the crap with Don King over the years wore on him, and I think from talking to him, he didn't fight the Greg Pages and the Michael Dokes because he didn't want to deal with Don King anymore. So he was fighting David Bay, James Bone Crusher Smith. He's fighting Carl the Truth Williams, who was green as hell at the time. Tim Witherspoon. I really think boredom got him more than anything else. And I don't think he took Michael Spinks seriously.
Oh, no, I agree. I got that feeling. I remember that's what I was thinking when I was watching the fight. He thought he just hit him a few times, just blown up light heavyweight, knock him out. Yeah. And he was surprised because he tried to come on, if you remember correctly. He later on tried hard to come on, and he made the fight very close because he was behind quite a bit and he was rallying. He was really coming on. And I think he just was like, this is a pushover. I'm going to win. Probably because people were telling him that, and he believed it. And
plus you're 50 pounds bigger than that guy 3 months before.
Yes.
And like I said, almost every comment I saw from writers predicting the fight, almost every one of them brought up the fact that Michael Spinks has to be slower because he put on 25 pounds. But Mackie Shilstone, I think, was the star of that fight because when I watched the old HBO broadcast when they showed the whole thing, the best part is the 5 or 10 minute segment they do about Shilstone with Spinks and the way they trained. And I mean, I think it was the first time Spinks had ever lifted weights. It was the first time they had him eating like 4,500 or 5,000 calories a day. And he wasn't doing any long distance running anymore. It was always sprints so he could practice getting his breath back. And the thing that amazed me was I don't think the HBO commentators like Barry Tompkins had ever watched the Mackie Shilstone part before the fight because Shilstone, they showed Spinks after he would run so many sprints, he would be recovering and Shilstone's telling him to breathe violently to try to get his breath back. And during the fight, in between rounds, especially from about the 5th round on, Spinks looks like he's about to die in the corner. And, I think it was Larry Merchant kept saying, well, Spinks looks like he's running out of gas. But if you'd have watched what happened beforehand, that was exactly the way Shilstone had trained him to deal with Larry Holmes.
See, now that's very interesting inside information. I forgot about that little stuff that they showed before that. I mean, hell of a long time ago. I sometimes forget.
Yeah, I've literally watched the entire HBO show probably 50 times in the last 37 years. So.
Okay, well, then that gives you the edge there in that respect. Yeah. I haven't seen it since. I only saw it the once.
Well, see, I only saw it once, but I remembered it. Nah. Because actually, see, the way I got to see the fight, this is the other thing. Since I lived in Aurora, Indiana, I had a dude, Larry Grubar was my next door neighbor. He was the manager of a Sears in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which was downtown. So he had HBO. So when there were fights, he would set the VCR up in the store to tape the fight for me and bring it to me on Monday night.
That's nice. Nice in those days, how it was, huh? Prehistoric days.
I know. It was kind of cool. It was special to be able to watch a fight then, especially if you lived in, in the middle of Indiana.
Boondocks, Indiana.
Dude, I never saw ESPN until 1993. And the worst part is this. It's not the worst part now, but it used to be worse, is my grandma lived in downtown Aurora. She had HBO, but this would have been probably 1986, 87. She had HBO. So I would go down and watch, I saw Tyson Douglas with her and everything. The only problem was for her to watch boxing with me, I would have to watch the PBS version of the Lawrence Welk show for an hour before the fights came on.
Well, that's a good trade-off. She probably was not.
You know what? It's a good trade-off now, and I wish I could go watch Lawrence Welk with her. But at the time, I was 22, 23 years old. I was so self-absorbed. I just wanted to see the fight. I hated that hour. And now when I look back at it, that was better than actually seeing the fights.
See, you didn't even realize that you were bonding with your grandmother with Lawrence Welk and boxing. So that's quite a combination.
And how many people can say they've bonded with their grandma because of Lawrence Welk and boxing?
I think you got that one. I think you got
all
that
right.
all yourself.
Anything else before we wrap it up? I know you're excited about Shakur Stevenson fighting this weekend.
I didn't say I was excited. I was very sarcastic on your part.
You said he was. Oh, you said he was really good. So
he is.
I know he's really good, but
he is
really
good.
I'd like to see him fight somebody really good.
I think he beats all the 135 pounders. To be honest, when he moves up, I think he's that talented, and hopefully people will give him the credit when he just can't knock out people like say a Davis can, but he can do everything else. So yeah, I love to watch him fight. He's a technician. He's starting to swat more. He's getting more aggressive. Probably a decision fight tomorrow, but he's just, if you just want to watch a guy that's really, really a talented boxer, tune in tomorrow and watch Shakur Stevenson work. He's that good.
Now, the guy he's fighting, I don't know how to say his, how do you say it?
Consejo. You say Consejo, yeah.
Consejo,
not Concepcion, not Dave Concepcion. Don't say that.
No, I'd watch it if it was Dave Concepcion. But, I mean, he did fight Oscar Valdez tough in a battle for the WBC title. I do remember seeing him in that fight.
Yes.
So, but I don't think the guy's a joke, which is
why he's not a joke.
Why, as you said, this will probably end up being a decision, though.
Yes, the guy's a long guy. He's a rangy guy, and he's a determined guy, and he's got some skills. But I don't think that as soon as Stevenson figures him out by about like round 3, he'll just outbox him, and then he might take some shots to try to stop him. And he might late. Won't be early. It'd be very surprising if it was early. But Stevenson just keeps growing talent-wise, and he's the real deal as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, from comparing him to the other 135 pounders, I would agree. I've seen him a couple times. So, I mean, to tell you the truth, present day boxing is kind of losing my interest.
Yeah, it'll get you back.
I think we all feel that way. I think even you feel that way, John.
I got no comment on that. So,
all I know is this seems more engaging when we talk about Michael Spinks and Larry Holmes.
Well, now I can't argue that because it was better in those days. I mean, that's bottom line.
Yes, it was. Or Michael Spinks against Dwight Muhammad Qawi.
Yes, it was a great time. Matthew Saad Muhammad before that in the light heavyweights. I mean, they had fighters that were ranked 50.
The sad thing was we never got to see Matthew Saad Muhammad against Michael Spinks.
Yeah, Matthew. We saw Matthew Saad Muhammad against Yaki Lopez. We saw him in so many brutal.
Richie Cates, the 2 Marvin Johnson fights.
Marvin Johnson
any fights you'll ever see.
The one in Indiana. The one with Marvin Johnson in Indiana. I was watching.
Yeah, Market Square Arena. The other one was the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Yeah.
Those
he
were
was
both all-time great fights. So were the Lopez fights.
Yeah, and there's a movie coming out on Matthew Saad, the book based on the book that Bill Detlef.
There is a movie coming out about it.
Yeah, they're basing it on his book, and I don't know where they are. I think they're in pre-production at this point, but. Bill's book got optioned, and they want to do a movie on him. And his story has got highs and really, really bad lows. Where he started from, being an orphan, and everything. I mean, wow.
And then what he became, and then unfortunately, it kind of ended the way it started.
Yes, that's like from rags to riches to rags again. Terrible.
I don't know. There's an IMB called Once a Champion from 1991 about Matthew.
That's not the one. Maybe it's not official yet, but I thought Bill said that that somebody bought his book. That's not even out yet. The bio on Matthew Saad Muhammad, and Bill's a great writer, so he wrote the book on Ezra Charles that was outstanding. So I'm sure the book on Matthew Saad Muhammad is going to be just fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I've read a few things Bill's wrote. He's really good. He's not as good as John Raspanti, who wrote Intimate Warfare, though. Right, John?
If you say so, Mike. Thank you so much for saying that.
I'm just kidding, Bill. All right.
Yeah, Intimate Warfare was just a blast to write. And I think about it fondly, pretty much.
Hey, and I agree with Frank real quick, because Frank says the Franklin Johnson fight at the Spectrum was better than the Indiana fight. I agree, too. The Franklin Johnson fight, I remember when I started trading tapes for boxing matches, like in the late 80s, I got a version of this from the Spectrum that was really dark, because everything from the Spectrum back then looked really dark.
Spectrum.
But it was an absolutely great fight, because I think I got that Saad Muhammad fight and then the Richie Cates fight. I think they fought in the spectrum also. But I remember because I loved Marvin Johnson because I hate to tell you, Craig Houck this as he keeps electing people to the Indiana Boxing Hall of Fame that have never even been to Indiana. But I mean, Marvin Johnson was one of my favorites, and it was cool because I actually got his phone number and actually got to talk to him a couple years ago. I just couldn't convince him that anybody would care about hearing an interview with Marvin Johnson, which is really sad because the guy was a great fighter.
Yeah, and Frank's right. I agree. That one at Spectrum was incredible. With regards to Marvin Johnson, I got to spend the whole afternoon with him and his family in Indiana a number of years ago. Wrote an article about it. He was great.
Damn, you didn't even invite me.
I didn't even know you then. How could I invite
You've always got an excuse, John.
Well,
jeez.
True. This was pre-Mike days. So
before your life turned so sunny, right?
Well, I'm not going to say that, but
okay. Hey, and also I do want to bring up that you went to Hawaii and you married Dove, so we want to congratulate you guys on that.
She's right over here doing something. Do you want to come over here to come on camera now for a split second and say hi? Mike just called us out and said that we went to Hawaii and got married. So do you want to come over here and say something? Mike is waiting. He's smiling.
Who am I saying it to?
Who have people who are going to be watching? Here comes Mike. There she is.
There you go. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I still don't know why you didn't fly me to Hawaii to hang out and be the best man, though, John.
Well, you know, we couldn't even get our own sons to come there.
Yeah,
so.
they're like, yeah. So, yeah. So.
Damn, did you offer to pay for it?
We both started new jobs, so it just was one of those things. And I have a huge ass family, so it's like, if you
well, I can tell you this. My sister, Naida, watches the show every once in a while, and I think she might be friends with John, but she saw a picture of you two guys together on Facebook a couple of years ago, and she said they're the cutest couple.
Really? See, I told you we're cute. She never believes it, but I said we're cute.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't know about the we are cute, John, but yeah.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I'll accept that. Yeah.
I'm going to go with this because I'm in it, but that's just me. So,
well,
you know.
Yeah, that's what everybody goes with.
No.
So.
I'm just honest.
Yeah, she's just honest.
But congratulations, guys. And
Thank
John
you so
will
much.
be back next Thursday at 1:00.
Sure. Of course. This is fun. Love doing this.
All right, guys. So we're going to wrap it up. Frank, thanks for your comments.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. On the money as usual.
Yep, we're going to wrap it up. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at grilling_truth. Make sure you like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you go to Amazon. How do you watch this fight? If you're talking about how do you watch this fight, John?
Joyce and Parker?
I don't know. Are you talking about Joyce Parker, Canelo Triple G, or are you talking about an actual fight, which would be Franklin and Johnson?
Well, Stevenson's on ESPN. I can tell you that much. That fight's He's probably not asking about that one, though. He's probably asking, I don't know. Yeah,
I'm guessing he's talking Franklin Johnson because that is a great fight. Hold on. Real quick. I'll see if I can find the link and see if I can put it on here for him.
For Franklin and Marvin Johnson? Yeah, that was. And both fights, Marvin Johnson was doing really well and winning. And then here comes Matthew Franklin, a.k.a. Matthew Saad Muhammad. That was, man.
All right. So if you are asking John about the fight, let's see. They can't, it won't let me post it, I don't think. There we go.
Canceled.
There we go. Well, it's an old Philly Spectrum fight, so probably not owned by too many people. But there is a YouTube link. If you go in and you just hit Franklin versus Johnson 1, you can find that fight that way. And the Parker Joyce fight, is that the zone this week or what?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. But if he just queries it, Googles it, how do I watch it? He'll find something for sure. It's not that hard to find it.
Yeah, I assume it is. And we know it'll be seen if you're in England. So hopefully it's on one of them because I want to watch it too. But all right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Make sure you check out PointsBet. Make sure you check out betting.net. Betting.net is the best place to find the best sports book you can legally bet on in the state you live in. So if I live in Indiana, I go to betting.net. It will actually show me all the sports books where I can actually legally bet. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Make sure you go to Amazon and do an author search for John Raspanti so you can find Blood on My Notebook, a few more rounds in intimate warfare. I almost said a few good men.
Okay.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. We'll see you next week. For John Raspanti, I'm Mike Goodpaster. Be watching and listening to The Grilling Truth, where the